Julie provides a client with specific income tax advice about the consequences of a transaction that the client has entered into. She completes another client's tax return and prepares the business activity statement of a different client. Julie also does bank reconciliations for another one of her clients. What kind of registration does Julie need when providing these types of services for a fee? Under the Tax Agent Services Act, there is a registration scheme for tax practitioners. The scheme is specifically for tax agents, Bas agents and tax financial advisors, and it is administered by the Tax Practitioners Board. The law does not permit someone to offer tax agent services, Bas services or tax financial advice services for award without registration. A tax agent service basically means ascertaining or advising a client about their tax obligations and entitlements. It also includes representing them in dealings with the ATO. To be a tax agent service, it is also necessary that the provision of such a service be provided in situations where it can be reasonably expected to be relied upon by the client. The most obvious examples of tax agent services are giving clients tax advice about their transactions and completing and/or lodging a tax return for a client. Other examples include representing a client in a tax audit, lodging an objection on behalf of the client to the ATO, or representing a client in the AAT on a tax matter. In contrast, giving tax advice that does not involve interpreting the tax law to the client's specific circumstances, and so it is not relied upon by the client, is not a tax agent service. Also, general data entry, preparing bank reconciliations, and auditing a self-managed super fund are not tax agent services. Most businesses need to regularly fill in and lodge activity statements to the ATO. This is undertaken to report and pay the periodical tax obligations of the business. Although a tax agent can complete and lodge these forms, sometimes such work is undertaken by a Bas agent, whose qualifications or expertise are generally more limited than that of a tax agent. The definition of a Bas service is similar to the definition of a tax agent service. However, a Bas service refers to services relating to a Bas provision. In contrast, the equivalent definition of a tax agent service refers to services relating to taxation law, which is a much broader term. Only certain taxation laws are regarded as being Bas provisions. Specifically, a Bas provision includes GST law, other indirect tax laws, FBT law as far as it relates to the collection and recovery of FBT, and PAYG withholding and PAYG instalment laws. Examples of Bas services are preparing the activity statements of clients, registering a client for GST, and advising a client about their PAYG withholding tax obligations. Preparing bank reconciliations, as well as simple data entry, are examples of services that are not Bas services, meaning that registration with the TPB is not required for the provision of such services. A tax financial advice service refers to certain tax services given by registered financial advisors or their representatives. The services covered are a subset of what falls under the definition of a tax agent service. A financial advisor ascertaining or giving advice regarding the client's tax liabilities or entitlements will generally be regarded as a tax financial advice service. However, representing clients in their dealings with the ATO while being a tax agent service is not a tax financial advice service. Giving general, broad tax advice that is not specific to the client and filling in tax returns on a client's behalf are other examples of activities that are not tax financial advice services. For Julie, giving tax advice to a client about the consequences of a transaction would be a tax agent service and would also be a tax financial advice service. As a result, if she were either a registered tax agent or a registered tax financial advisor, she could undertake these tasks. Filling and lodging a client's tax return is a tax agent service, so Julie would need to be a registered tax agent for this. Preparing and lodging an activity statement is both a tax agent service and a Bas agent service. So if Julie was either a registered tax agent or a registered Bas agent, she could perform this task. Lastly, performing a bank reconciliation does not fall under any of the 3 types of tax practitioner services, so Julie could undertake this without TPB registration. To recap, the Tax Agent Services Act provides for the registration and regulation of tax agents, Bas agents and tax financial advisors by the Tax Practitioners Board. Tax Agent Services, Bas Services and Tax Financial Advisor Services are clearly defined, and if tax practitioners provide services for a fee, they need to be registered and ensure that their services are permitted for the particular registration type.